They thought he was gone, trapped in silence, unable to move, unable to speak. But the truth was far more dangerous. He was listening. Every whisper, every sigh, every secret spilled in that dim hospital room found its way into his mind. And on this night, as the rain tapped against the window and the machines hummed steadily at his bedside, his nurse leaned close and confessed something that would shatter everything he thought he knew. This is the story of a black billionaire who pretended to be in a coma, and the confession that would change both their lives forever. Asterisk, the room smelled of antiseptic and rain. Beyond the half-closed blinds, the city's skyline glowed in scattered pockets of orange and white. It was a city that never truly slept, much like the man lying in the hospital bed. Victor Stone, age 54, net worth $3.1 billion. Self-made, a name that once dominated the headlines for mergers, innovations, and political influence. Now, just a shadow under pale hospital lighting, his body still, his eyes closed, his breathing controlled by sheer will rather than any machine. To the world, and even to the nurse tending to him, Victor was in a coma. But to Victor, every sound was a thread in a web he was quietly weaving. The steady beeping of the heart monitor masked his own heartbeat, which quickened whenever footsteps entered the room. The fourth drip clicked rhythmically, marking time like a metronome for his thoughts. And in those thoughts, one truth replayed over and over. Someone in this hospital is lying to me. This elaborate act wasn't born of paranoia. It was calculated. Weeks earlier, an anonymous letter had arrived at his private estate. No signature, no return address. Just one line in perfect black ink. The truth hides in plain sight, but you can only hear it when they think you're gone. Victor had built empires on reading people, knowing when they lied, when they bluffed, when they were about to turn on him. That skill had saved him millions, and perhaps even his life. But this was different. The letters, timing, coming just days before a sudden health scare landed him in this hospital, was too perfect to ignore. So, when the doctors informed him he'd suffered a mild stroke, Victor made a decision that shocked even himself. He would let them believe he'd slipped into a coma. No eye movement, no twitch of the fingers, no accidental flinch. For days, he lay perfectly still, and in that stillness, he became something dangerous, invisible. The first week was uneventful. Orderlies moved in and out, nurses changed shifts, and the doctor gave polite updates to the concerned visitors who came in expensive suits and whispered too quietly for the microphones in the hallway to catch. But Victor heard them all. The business associate who said, if he doesn't wake up in a month, the board will have to move on without him. The cousin he hadn't seen in 10 years, casually asking about the details of his will. The assistant, who was supposed to be loyal, asking the nurse if the key to his private safe had been found. Each conversation planted another seed of suspicion, but it was on the 10th night, as thunder rolled in from the east, that the silence broke in a way Victor never expected. Her name was Lena, late 20s, almond eyes, a voice so soft it could pass for the wind itself. She had been assigned to the night shift on his floor. Most nights, she worked quietly, adjusting his blankets, checking his vitals, and humming songs under her breath. But tonight, her hum was absent. Her hands trembled as she adjusted his IFR, and then she pulled a chair close to his bed. Victor could feel her presence like a change in air pressure. His pulse quickened, though he kept his body still, his face slack. He counted the beats in his head to control his breathing. 1, 2, 3. Lena spoke. I can't keep this to myself anymore, she whispered, almost to herself. If I don't tell someone, I'll lose my mind. She sighed, the sound trembling, as if she'd been holding it in 4 weeks. I never meant for it to happen. I thought I was helping him, but now he's dead, and it's my fault. Victor's brain froze, the words echoing in his mind. Dead? Who? He wanted to open his eyes, to demand answers, but he forced himself to stay still. Lena's voice cracked as she went on. It was supposed to be simple, just deliver the envelope. That's all. I didn't even open it, but the next day, they said he'd collapsed. And then I saw the news. They said it was natural causes. She laughed bitterly. Natural, that's what they called it. Rain began to drum harder against the window, masking the faint sound of her sniffles. She leaned closer, so close that Victor could feel the heat of her breath near his ear. I don't know if anyone else knows I was involved, but if they find out, I'm done. My career, my life, gone. Victor's mind raced. This wasn't about him, at least, not directly. But the timing, the secrecy, it had to connect somehow. Who was he? What was in that envelope? And most importantly, why was Lena telling him a man she believed couldn't hear a word? A sharp knock at the door jolted them both. Lena jumped, quickly standing and wiping at her face. Coming, she called, her voice suddenly professional again. The door opened just a crack, and a shadowy figure spoke from the hallway. Remember what we talked about? The voice said, deep male. Cold. Lena nodded, glancing nervously at Victor's still form before slipping out of the room. The door clicked shut, and the only sound left was the rain and the slow, steady beep of the heart monitor. Victor lay there, every muscle aching from the effort of stillness. His mind replayed her words over and over. An envelope, a death. Fear of being found out. This was no coincidence. Whatever game was being played in the shadows, he was no longer a bystander, he was right in the center of it. And as the night deepened, Victor Stone made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, even if it meant keeping up this act until it broke him, because somewhere in this hospital, a secret had been buried, and he was the only one listening. The rain eased to a mist, and the city's glow dulled to a smolder behind the blinds. Within the quiet, Victor Stone lay, as he had for days, unmoving, unspeaking yet never more awake. The nurse's confession kept looping in his mind, a jagged hook he couldn't shake. An envelope, a death, and a man in the hallway whose voice wore the chill of a basement door. People imagine silence is empty. Victor knew better. Silence, when people think you're not there, fills itself. It collects fragment shoe squeaks and cologne trails. Hushed arguments, the clink of a watch bracelet against clipboard metal. His mind had learned to catalog them all. The old investor in him resurfaced. Observe, sort, price the risks. He listened for Lena's return, but another pair of footsteps arrived first. Long stride, confident, no squeak. The door opened without a knock. A familiar rustle, the dry scrape of an expensive suit. The heart monitor ticked on. Still no change. The voice belonged to Colin Vale, Victor's interim CEO. Slick, careful, the kind of man who never asked a question without already knowing the answer. A second voice, lower, threaded with fatigue, answered. No response to stimuli. GCS still 3. Dr. Ree, the attending, competent, cautious, paid to keep Victor alive. Paid by the hospital. Anyway, Colin exhaled through his nose. The board meets Wednesday. Optics are delicate. Your optics don't live in my chart, Ree said dryly. Flippin' papers. My patient does, of course. A smile in the word, a courtroom smile. We appreciate everything. I'm simply ensuring we're prepared. Prepared for what? Victor swallowed the impulse to snort. Prepared to move him from man to myth. A chair scraped closer to the bed. Colin leaned in. Victor could smell his aftershave vetiver and something citrus. A signature he'd registered at a dozen board dinners. You were always 10 moves ahead, Colin murmured, as if paying respects at a graveside. If you can hear me. He let it hang, then pitched his voice a shade brighter. For the doctor's benefit, we're all pulling for you. The door shut. Their voices drifted into the hallway, softened by walls. Victor filed away the cadence, the timing, the practiced sympathy. The board meets Wednesday. A clock ticked to life in his head. Another hour passed, not measured by the wall clock, but by the hospital's rhythms, a medication cart rattling, a distant laugh at the nurse's station, a television somewhere running a late-night game show. Rain hissed against the glass like static. He tried to reconstruct the nurse's confession from every angle. If Lena had carried an envelope and someone collapsed a day later, why come confess by an empty bed? Unless the bed wasn't empty. Unless she knew something tied to him. The door eased open. Soft shoes, this time, careful steps. Not Colin. Not Dr. Ree. A whisper of fabric, then the quiet thud of a chair leg touching the floor. Brett's measure drew closer. You should have stayed asleep, Mr. Stone. The words were barely air, but they hit like a slap. Not Lena, a man, mid-30s by the breath's elasticity. A smoker once, perhaps something rattled at the edge of his exhale. Victor kept his diaphragm loose, letting his chest rise and fall on the heart monitor's metronome. A plastic snap, gloved. The prickle of cold alcohol ghosted the skin inside Victor's elbow, right where a vein ran. He didn't flinch. The breath hovered. It's cleaner this way, the voice murmured, almost tender. No more messes for anyone to find. Footsteps in the hallway. The man froze. The alcohol swab peeled back from Victor's skin. The doorknob turned. Light from the corridor sliced a thin line across the floor. Asterisk. Night meds, Lena said, brisk, professional. The intruder melted backward, so silently Victor wondered if he'd imagined him until a shadow crossed the light and slid past Lena into the hall. She didn't seem to notice. Or she pretended not to. She moved through her checks in efficient motions, blood pressure, temperature, chart taps. Only when the door clicked shut behind her did she let her shoulders drop. The professional mask unhooked. For a second, a tremor passed through her hands. Okay, she breathed. Almost inaudible. Okay, she sat. The chair gave a tiny creak, same as earlier. Victor kept his breaths at 32 per minute. The range Ree had noted. Lena leaned close, fingers barely touching the sheet. It might have been a comforting touch for any other patient. For Victor, it was Morse. A pattern. 3 soft taps. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. He almost smiled. Basic code. The kind they taught in old scout manuals and never left truly obsolete. But it wasn't Morse to few taps to mean letters. It was rhythm. 3 2 3. She repeated it, then stilled. Was she signaling? Or steadying herself on something she alone could hear? She glanced at the door, then down again. I don't know if you can hear me, she whispered, reverting to the script that protected her. If you can, don't react. She swallowed. I didn't know what was in that envelope. He told me it was for a donor, something time-sensitive. I was doing a favor for someone who helped me get this job. Her hands tightened around the sheet. The next day, the donor died in his hotel room. Natural causes. It didn't feel natural. Victor kept his body inert, but his thoughts flared. Donor hotel room. The hospital's philanthropy wing was a web of galanites and naming rights. Money flowed in, to save lives and sometimes to launder reputations. If a donor had died and an envelope had moved the night before, Lena's voice dipped. They told me to forget it. Then someone left a message in my locker, 3 numbers and a letter. M317B. She shook her head. I don't know what it is. A storage cage, a room. All I know is the man in the hall. Her eyes flicked toward the door, said people who ask questions here get redeployed to night shifts in wards with no windows. Or worse, M317B. Victor rolled it across his mind like a coin. M could be a sublevel 3, a floor. 17 B cage, a shelf, an inventory tag. The hospital had a maze beneath it. Labs, storage, records, drug vaults. He'd funded. Their new winghain knew the blueprints better than most. If M3 was the 3rd mechanical level, 17B could be a cage in the sterile supply. At the nurse's station, a printer coughed. Lena flinched, then stood quickly and reset the mask of professionalism. I'll be back, she said, louder, for anyone listening. Mr. Stone's stable. Asterisk. When she left, Victor let his lungs drain to the bottom and rise again slow. Controlled. Someone had tried to end him just now, in that sliver of time before Lena entered. He replayed the intruder's words. You should have stayed asleep. Cleaner this way. Cleaner for whom? For a board eager to act. For a hospital hiding a scandal. For a donor whose death couldn't survive a second look. A code blue erupted 3 rooms down, the alarms knifing the quiet. Footsteps thundered past. His door, voices overlapped. Epinephrine. Charged. The flurry swallowed the corridor. In the chaos, his door cracked open an inch. A cooler scraped inside, bumped against the bedstand. A handglove slid along the counter. Plastic rustled. The intruder again. The room's air shifted. Victor made a choice. He counted to 6, then took a breath, not from habit but from intent. Shallow, shallow, then a sudden held pause. The heart monitor's cadence stumbled. A flat line hadn't sounded, but the rhythm hiccup snapped different enough for any trained ear to feel it. In the doorway, the shadow paused. The hand stilled. The monitor returned to its metronome. The shadow withdrew. A beat later, Dr. Ree burst in, all momentum and focus. What happened? She scanned the screen, then Victor's face. A careful palm pressed against his sternum. Testing. No change. She exhaled, bled off adrenaline, and shot a look at the hallway. Where's that pharmacy tech? I saw him in here. Which tech? A nurse asked from the station. Tall, maintenance jacket, badge on a clip. He was restopped, recalibrated. Never mind. Lock the narc cabinet. We've got too many people in and out. Tonight, her caution washed through Victor like a small mercy. She suspected movement around him. She just didn't know from where. When the commotion thinned, Lena returned, eyes scanning everything. She held a paper cup and, improbably, a plastic-capped tea bag. She set them down and whispered, 2 minutes. Then she positioned herself so her back blocked the tiny glass panel on the door and lifted Victor's left hand beneath the sheet only millimeters, enough to shift a tendon that no camera would catch, enough that he could feel the proof of his own agency. Her voice was a thread. If you can move at all, don't do it now. Do it only when someone says the word garden. Garden. The code wasn't subtle, but it was elegant. No accidental triggers. Only when the word arrived, buried in a sentence, would he risk a tell. She lowered his hand back. Exact. The sheet, undisturbed. If you heard me, remember it, she breathed. She slid the tea bag back into her pocket, as if rethinking the comfort. Then, out loud, for any ears in the hall, Mr. Stone is resting. After she left, the room expanded again. The storm had moved on. The night pressed its cold face to the window. Victor's body ached with the effort of restraint. His mind moved. Through corridors beneath the hospital M3, Esterel Supply 7B, building a mental map of cages and codes. If he were the kind of man to leave a message in a locker, he would choose a place no one looked twice. If he were the kind of man to remove a patient quietly, he would choose a moment like a code blue, when everyone ran. Asterisk. Near dawn, the chaplain arrived. He always did coffee on his breath, a softness in his step. He said a short prayer, as he had each day, for strength and for truth. He took Victor's hand, warm human contact in the humming mechanical world, and laid it gently back. The garden is quiet at this hour. The chaplain murmured simple conversation to the sleeping, a ritual of comfort. I walked through it on my way in. Victor's pulse thumped once, hard. Garden, not yet, he told himself. The chaplain's tone didn't hold the edge of a test. He was the wrong witness. Patience is profit. The chaplain's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen, stepped back, and left with a nod. Moments later, the door slid open again. The maintenance jacket, returned the intruder, the cleaner of messes, carrying the cooler with the easy strength of someone who had moved bodies that could not complain. He set it by the bed, eyes flicking to the monitor, then to the door window. No more visits, he said softly, almost to himself. No more prayers. He reached for Victor's IV port. Somewhere down the hall, Lena's voice cut through the quiet light, casual, as if to a colleague at a vending machine. Did you check the garden level for that mislabeled kit? M3, cage 17B. I think it's down there. Garden level. Victor's index finger twitched beneath the sheet half a millimeter. The smallest rebellion, and the heart monitor hiccuped, just once, like a blip in a lie detector. The man's hand froze. He turned his head slowly toward Victor's face. The room held its breath. The man in the maintenance jacket didn't blink. His eyes were flat, calculating, the kind of stare Victor had only seen in two places before: the trading floor during a hostile takeover, and in the last seconds before a fighter throws a punch. He had noticed the twitch, the blip on the monitor. Victor kept his face slack, limbs still, but inside every nerve was straining. The man took a slow step closer to the bed, leaning in as if to inspect the IV port. His voice was a low murmur, almost a purr. So, the rumors are true. Victor wanted to breathe faster, but he didn't. He wanted to answer, but he couldn't, not yet. This was still a game of inches, and the wrong move would hand his opponent the win. The man smirked faintly, straightened, and walked to the corner of the room where the security camera's blind spot lived, a detail Victor knew well. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. Not a weapon, not exactly. A small digital device, no larger than a pager. He pressed a button, and the heart monitor's screen flickered once, then froze, still showing a steady rhythm. Signal jammer, Victor thought, or a loop injector. He was cutting Victor off from the rest of the hospital visually, electronically. The man glanced at the door's window, then back at Victor. I don't know how long you've been awake, Stone, he said casually, and, frankly, I don't care. I'm here to make sure you stay quiet. Permanently, he moved back toward the foreline. Before the needle could pierce the port, the door handle rattled. The man's head snapped up. Delivery for Mr. Stone. A young orderly's voice called from the hall. The man slid the needle back into his sleeve, stepped away from the bed, and grabbed the cooler. In one smooth motion, he slipped out the door, brushing past the orderly without a word. The orderly came in with a cardboard tray of drinks, looking confused. Your nurse said you like the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings, he said cheerfully, setting the tray on the table. Victor remained motionless, but inside, his thoughts raced. That wasn't an accident. Lena sent him. She was buying him time, distracting the man with the cooler. But how long until he came back? The orderly left, and the room settled again into that uneasy hum. Victor replayed Lena's words from earlier, M317B, the garden level code. If the storage cage really held something connected to the envelope, it could also hold leverage. Leverage strong enough to turn this game around, but getting there meant moving. Moving meant revealing he was conscious, and revealing meant losing the one advantage he had: invisibility. That night, Lena returned. She moved quickly, checking the machines, then lowering her voice. I saw him go down to M3. He had the cooler. He's looking for something, or hiding it. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and slid it under the blanket by his hand. Blueprint of the level. I marked 17B. Victor's fingers didn't close around it, but he registered its position. He'd retrieve it later. When she was gone, Lena hesitated, glancing at the hallway. I can get you down there, but once we do this, there's no going back. No. Victor lay still, but in his head, the decision was already made. He hadn't built an empire by folding under pressure. Near midnight, the opportunity came. A fire drill alarm shrieked through the floor, not an evacuation, just a test, but enough to scramble routines. Lena slipped in, wearing a janitor's jacket 2 sizes too big, and a cap pulled low. Can you stand? She whispered. Victor took his first deliberate breath in weeks, opened his eyes a fraction, and gave a single, controlled nod. Her eyes widened slightly. Even she hadn't been entirely sure. She slid her arm under his and pulled. Every muscle screamed in protest, but he rose. The world tilted, his legs like wet rope, but he gritted his teeth. They moved into the hall, his head down, Lena pushing the wheelchair she'd stashed by the door. In the chaos of the alarm, they passed unnoticed. Nurses at the station were too busy checking charts and verifying patient counts. The elevator to the lower levels smelled of damp concrete and cleaning agents. The ride was slow, each ding echoing like a countdown. When the doors opened, the garden level M3 stretched before them, a long corridor lined with metal cages, each marked with a letter number code. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting pale shadows. 17B was halfway down. The cage was locked, a heavy padlock gleaming under the light. Lena pulled a small key from her pocket. Borrowed from supply, she said. The lock clicked open. They stepped inside. The smell hit first, sharp, chemical, mixed with the faint metallic temps of old blood. Boxers lined the shelves, labeled in block letters, surgical kits, sealed cartons, biohazard containers, and, in the far corner, a black envelope. No markings. Just like Lena had described, Victor reached for it, but before his fingers touched the paper, a voice cut through the air, deep, cold, the same one from his hospital room. You really should have stayed upstairs, Stone. Victor turned slowly. The man in the maintenance jacket stood in the cage doorway, blocking their exit. His right hand was in his pocket. From the shape, Victor knew exactly what was in it. Asterisk, the metal door of the storage cage clanged shut, the sound ricocheting through the concrete corridor like a gunshot. The man in the maintenance jacket stepped forward, his boots heavy on the grated floor. The dim fluorescent light caught the edge of a smirk tugging at his mouth. Victor and Lena stood frozen, the black envelope between them and the man, like some cursed artifact. You've got nerve, the man said, his voice low and deliberate. Walking down here, standing up. I thought you were smarter than that, Stone. Victor didn't move his gaze from the man's eyes, dark, unreadable, but coiled with intent. He spoke for the first time in weeks, his voice rough but steady. And I thought you were smarter than to leave me alive. That got a flicker, just a flicker, but enough. The man's right hand stayed in his pocket, his fingers flexing slightly. Lena shifted subtly closer to Victor, as if she could shield him from what was coming. The man chuckled, the sound flat and humorless. I didn't think I had to. This stroke should have taken care of you. But some people just don't know when to quit. Victor stepped forward, slow, letting each movement show deliberate control. He kept his eyes locked on the man while his peripheral vision tracked every inch of the cramped cage, the shelving, the padlock hanging open, the boxes stacked high enough to climb. Who sent you? Victor asked. The smirk hardened into a line. You wouldn't live long enough to write it down. Lena took a half step forward, her voice trembling but sharp. You don't have to do this. Whatever's in that envelope isn't for you, the man cut in, his tone slicing through hers. And if you'd stayed in your lane, nurse, you'd still have a lane to stay in. Victor's mind spun. The envelope was important enough to kill for. That meant it wasn't just evidence. It was leverage. And leverage meant someone powerful was pulling the strings. The man took another step, closing the distance. Slide it over, nice and slow. Victor bent, picking up the envelope with a steady hand. But instead of handing it over, he tore the flap in one swift motion. The man lunged. Lena moved faster than Victor expected. She yanked one of the metal shelves hard, sending a cascade of boxers toppling between them and the attacker. Surgical kits clattered to the floor, instruments spilling like silver rain. Victor shoved the torn envelope into his jacket before the man cleared the fallen boxes. Inside, a glimpse of glossy photographs and something that looked like a signed contract. No time to read. The man shoved a box aside, his hand finally coming out of his pocket, gripping a short, dark-handled blade. Last chance, he growled. Victor raised his voice, sharp and loud. Help! Down here! His shout bounced through the corridor, echoed by the metal walls. Somewhere far down the hall, a door opened and voices called back. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound, calculating the seconds before backup arrived. In that flicker, Victor acted. He grabbed a tray of metal instruments from the shelf and flung it toward the man's face. The clatter and glare made him recoil just enough for Lena to grab Victor's arm and pull him toward the cage door. They slipped past him, the smell of oil and sweat sharp as they brushed by. They ran, Victor's legs still shaky, but powered by adrenaline, down the corridor toward the elevator. Shouts followed, but the fire drill chaos upstairs masked their footsteps. When they reached the elevator, Lena slammed the button, glancing back. The man was sprinting after them now, blade still in hand. The elevator doors opened with agonizing slowness. They tumbled inside, Lena hitting the button for the main floor. The doors slid shut just as the man reached them, his palms slapping the metal. He locked eyes with Victor through the narrowing gap. It's not over, he mouthed as the elevator rose. Victor finally allowed himself a breath. His heart thundered, his hand still gripping the torn envelope. Lena looked at him, eyes wide. Whatever's in there, it's worth your life, and mine. Victor opened the flap wider, pulling out the contents. The photographs were grainy, but clear enough images of Colin Vale, shaking hands with an unfamiliar man in what looked like a private airfield. Behind them, a crate marked with the hospital's philanthropy logo. The contract was worse. It detailed the transfer of restricted medical shipments to an offshore location, signed by both Colin Vale and Dr. E. Victor's pulse spiked. Medical shipments could mean anything. Vaccines, narcotics, even organs. And now he had proof. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened into the brighter, busier world of the main floor. But Victor knew, brighter didn't mean safer. Lena gripped his arm. We can't stay here. They'll come for us. Victor slipped the envelope inside his jacket again. Then we go somewhere they won't follow. As they moved through the crowd, Neither noticed the man in the maintenance jacket stepping out of a stairwell across the lobby. His eyes locked on them, his phone already at his ear. Asterisk, the hospital lobby was a blur of motion, visitors clutching coffee cups, nurses ferrying clipboards, the squeak of shoes on polished tile. To anyone watching, Victor Stone was just another discharged patient being wheeled toward the sliding glass doors. But to Victor, every reflection in the glass, every angle of a security camera, was another possible sightline for a man with a blade and orders to silence him. Lena pushed the wheelchair briskly, her eyes scanning the crowd. She didn't speak. The tension between them didn't need words. In Victor's jacket, the torn black envelope seemed to radiate heat. Proof. Leverage. A reason to live through the next 10 minutes. Behind them, somewhere in the flow of people, the man in the maintenance jacket was moving to. Victor caught glimpses of a shadow in the glass, a shoulder brushing past a nurse, the faint reflection of that flat, dangerous stare. The sliding doors whispered open, and the cool bite of early morning air hit Victor's face. The street outside was waking, delivery trucks unloading crates, taxis idling, steam curling from sewer grates. Lena steered toward the curb, where a black sedan idled with its hazard lights on. "Friend of mine," Lena murmured. "He doesn't ask questions." Victor didn't argue. The driver, a wiry man with mirrored sunglasses, popped the trunk for the wheelchair and gestured them into the back seat. As they pulled into traffic, Victor risked a glance over his shoulder. The man in the jacket had stepped onto the sidewalk, scanning the street. His gaze locked on the sedan. Then, calmly, he lifted a phone to his ear. The city slid by gray buildings. Splashes of neon from 24-hour shops. The rhythmic clatter of an elevated train above. Victor's mind was working at speed now, sharper than it had been in years. "We can't just run forever," he said. "We need to hit back. Hard." Publicly, Lena kept her eyes forward. "You go public, they'll smear you before you finish your first sentence. They'll call you delusional, say the coma affected your mind." And then, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Victor tapped the envelope inside his jacket. "These photos, this contract, they're the truth, and the truth is leverage." The driver took a sudden left, accelerating. In the side mirror, a dark SUV followed, its grille glinting in the early light. "We've got company," the driver muttered. The SUV closed the gap. A window slid down, and Victor caught the silhouette of the man in the jacket in the passenger seat. "Lose them," Victor ordered. The driver's mouth twitched into a grin. He swerved sharply into an alley, tires skidding on wet asphalt. The SUV followed, headlights bouncing off brick walls. The alley ended in a narrow gap between two warehouses. Too narrow for the SUV, but just enough for the sedan. The driver threaded the car through with inches to spare. Metal scraped metal. Sparks spat from the wall. The SUV braked hard, blocked, and the sound of slamming doors echoed after them. They emerged into a side street. The morning sun cutting through. The driver sped 2 more blocks, then pulled into an underground parking garage. "End of the line for me," he said. "If you're smart, you'll disappear now." Victor and Lena climbed out. The driver vanished back into daylight, leaving them in the dim hum of fluorescent lights. Victor turned to Lena. "We're not disappearing. We're delivering this straight to someone who can't bury it." "Who?" she asked. "The press." "The right press." Asterisk. An hour later, they were in the corner booth of a small cafe across from a local newspaper's office. The editor, an older woman with sharp eyes and a sharper pen, sat across from them. The envelope lay open on the table. She flipped through the photographs. The contract. Her brows lifted, her eyes narrowing in places. Finally, she looked up. "You understand," she said, "that if I print this, it won't just end careers. It will end lives." "It's already trying to end mine," Victor replied. She studied him a moment longer, then slid the materials into a plain manila folder. "You'll have your story, but I suggest you keep moving." As they left the cafe, Lena's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then froze. "It's from my locker. A message, just 3 words. Victor looked at her. "What does it say?" She swallowed. "Garden is closed." They both knew what it meant. The hospital connection was burned. Whatever safety they'd had, there was gone. Across the street, a black SUV eased to a stop. The passenger window rolled down just enough for Victor to see the man in the maintenance jacket watching them. That same flat stare, locked in place. But this time, Victor didn't flinch. He met the man's gaze, then turned to Lena. "Let him watch. The next move's ours." Asterisk. And that was just the beginning. The photographs, the contract, they were enough to start a fire in the city. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. If you want to know what happened when we finally went public, stay with this channel, because the next chapter, it doesn't just threaten one man's life, it could bring down an empire. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and tell me, if you heard the confession that could end it all, would you speak up, or would you stay silent?